This is a public hearing on draft addendum 32 to the Lobster F&P, and this is focused on repealing the addendum 27 gauge and vent size measures. And my name is Caitlin Starks. I'm the Fishery Management Plan Coordinator at the Atlantic States Marine Fisheries Commission that works on lobster. And I'll be going through the presentation tonight and then calling on folks for questions and comments at the end. So with that, just a reminder on the audio webinar controls. We can pull these back up at the end if needed, but this is where you'll find your hand raising button for asking questions or making comments. And if the green arrow is pointing up, it means your hand is down and you are pressing the green arrow to raise it. And then the microphone button is also located on your side panel, and that is going to be red if it is muted, and I am not seeing my slides advance, so give me 1 second. Okay, there we go. All right, yeah, so it'll be red if you're muted and green means your mic is live. All right, so just a quick overview of the presentation. I'm gonna start with the timeline for this addendum, the objective, the background information, and the statement of the problem. And then I'll go over the proposed management options included in the document. And then after that, I'll talk about the next steps and we'll wrap up with questions and public comments. So draft addendum 32 was initiated in February 2025, and in March, the board approved the document for public comment. So we are now in the middle of our comment period, and that will go through April 25th. And following that, the board will be considering this addendum for final approval in May. In February, the board made this motion to initiate draft addendum 32, and this gets to the objective of the addendum, which is to repeal the gauge and vent size measures of addendum 27. And the context for this draft addendum is going back to May 2023. Addendum 27 was approved to increase the protection of the Gulf of Maine spawning stock, and in recognition of low levels of settlement and declining recruitment in the Gulf of Maine from about 2012 forward, Addendum 27 took a proactive approach that established a trigger mechanism based on recruitment abundance indices, whereby a series of gauge and vent sizes changes to those gauge and vent sizes would occur for LCMA 1, 3, and Outer Cape Cod, and those would automatically be implemented if a trigger was reached. And the trigger index that was developed for this addendum, for addendum 27, used 3 recruitment abundance indices from the Gulf of Maine stock. And the trigger point that was established by addendum 27 was if that trigger index declined by 35% from the reference period, which was the 2016 to 2018 average value of that index, that would trigger the automatic implementation of the measures. So in October 2023, when the 2022 index data were pulled in, the trigger index had then declined by 39% from the reference period. So that triggered the implementation of the series of management measures in the addendum. The original implementation date for the first of those measures, which is an increase to the LCMA 1 minimum gauge size, was set for June 1st, 2024. And then in October 2023, the board delayed the implementation of all of the measures in addendum 27 to January 1st, 2025. And then via addendum 31, the board postponed the implementation of the Outer Cape Cod maximum gauge size and V-notch definition, as well as the LCMA 1 gauge size and vent size changes an additional 6 months to July 1st, 2025. And those delays were to provide the industry and gauge makers more time to prepare for the changes and also to coordinate with Canada on management and trade issues. In the meantime, the lobster industry in the Gulf of Maine continued to express concerns about potential economic impacts associated with the addendum 27 measures, as well as uncertainty about how the Area 1 minimum gauge size increase might affect trade with Canada. And in February, the board agreed that consideration of alternative management measures was warranted to address those concerns. And the Gulf of Maine states committed to working with their lobster industries to identify alternative conservation strategies. So that brings us to the proposed options in draft addendum 32. And there's only 2 options in this document. Option A is status quo, and option B is to repeal the addendum 27 gauge and vent size changes. So under option A, the current implementation schedule for all addendum 27 measures would be maintained. So this table shows when each of those changes is set to be implemented, and the changes are shown in bold text. So the LCMA 1 minimum size increase is set to occur on July 1st, 2025. Also on July 1st of this year, under option A, the maximum gauge size for all permit holders in Outer Cape Cod would be 6 3/4 inches, and the V-notch possession definition for all permit holders would be 1/8 of an inch with or without sedal hairs. Then on July 1st, 2027, the second increase to the Area 1 minimum size would occur. And then the Area 1 vent size change would occur on July 1st, 2028. And finally, on July 1st, 2029, the maximum gauge decrease for Outer Cape Cod and LCMA 3 would be implemented. So under option B, all changes to gauge and escape vent sizes that were established by Addendum 27 would be repealed. So that includes the maximum gauge size change in Outer Cape Cod under section 3.1 of Addendum 27, and also the minimum and maximum gauge size changes triggered in section 3.2 and the vent size change in section 3.2. Option B, however, would not affect the measures of Addendum 27 that pertain to the V-notch possession definition in Outer Cape Cod, nor the issuance of trap tags. So the V-notch definition change would still take effect on July 1st, 2025 under either option A or option B. And the trap tag rules are already effective as of January 1st of this year. So those are the addendum options. Again, only 2 of them. And the next steps for draft addendum 32 are to complete this public comment period. And then in May, the board will consider all of the public input and the addendum for final approval. So before we get to questions and comments, I want to go over some information on submitting written comments. If you want to write comments and send them in after this hearing, you can do that by email or mail using the addresses shown here on this slide. And please note that the deadline for comments is Friday, April 25th at 11:59 p.m. And if comments are not submitted by then, they will not be considered by the board.